in this unit, we are going to talk about functions. We're going to talk about row functions. So functions are broken up into two chapters in our textbook. There's the row functions chapter and then the group functions chapter. So a row function is basically what you might call a scalar function in any other programming language. So it's a function that basically it operates on a a set of arguments, and then it gives you back one result, right? So you don't get back a table, you don't get back an object or an array or anything like that. You just get back a single result, just like a scalar function. So these are the simplest functions to learn in Oracle. Now there are tons of functions in Oracle, hundreds of functions that are available to us in PL SQL and in the right in the SQL command line. So I'm going to talk about a few of those. We're going to break it up into a couple categories. So first I'm going to talk about some string functions. And almost every programming language has string functions. So we'll talk about some of the string functions available to us in Oracle. And then some functions we have with numbers like rounding and so forth. And then some things we can do with dates, right? Dates are always treated a little bit different than other data types. And then we'll talk about regular expressions, which is a way of searching a string. So it's a little bit more advanced than just doing a find or something like that. But I'll talk about regular expressions. If you've taken any other programming classes, there's a good chance you probably learned a little bit about regular expressions. You could probably take a whole class on regular expressions. Just about every programming language uses some syntax of regex or regular expressions. And then finally, I'll talk about a couple other functions that are useful that maybe just we can't categorize, but I'll just talk about them and explain how they work. Now, like anything else, like any other assignment, first we need to import some SQL scripts. So let me go to my SQL scripts, and I'm just going to import the data file for unit for chapter 11 from our textbook. Apparently, I have to log in first, though. So let me log in. All right, so I'm going to go to my SQL scripts. I'm just going to import my. I'm going to attach the file or upload the file that is a script for this unit. This is chapter 10 in your textbook. So if you're looking at the data files in Blackboard, if you're using my edition of the book, you may be using a slightly different edition, but I'm going to get my chapter 10 data file. So give me just a second here. There we go. So there's 10. And I'm just going to go ahead and upload that, and then we'll execute it. And then, all right, it's running the script. And then we should have what we need to complete this assignment. All right, I'm not sure if we're going to need everything in there for me just to show you this stuff, but make sure before you attempt the assignments that you do run that SQL script. All right, so let's get started. So first, we're going to talk about some string characters. Now, before I go crazy here, I want to show you something. To demonstrate these functions, we don't necessarily have to select stuff directly from a real table, right? We can play around with these functions without having to look at tables, and I'll show you how to do that. And I think we did this earlier in another unit, but just in case you don't remember, let's say I just wanted to select a value, right? So for example, I want to select my name, right? If I try to just run this, right, and I'll just call this as my name. There we go. So if I try to run this, it's going to break. It's not going to output anything. In Oracle, you have to have the from clause. It's required. In other database languages, you don't have to do this. So if you're using Microsoft or MySQL or PostgreSQL, you could just do select some literal string and write the double quotes means it's a literal string, and then some column name, and it'll just output it for you. But in Oracle, you have to do from dual, so you have to select it from a fake table. So dual is just a fake table. Of course, that didn't work because I think I need to put single quotes around it. Sorry, single quotes is the literal. I would put double quotes around the table name. My apologies. All right, so that ran, and it output my name, right? Pretty simple. So now I'm going to show you some functions. So one function that we could use here is the upper, right? So upper will convert the entire string. By the way, whenever you use a function, you'll have the function name, as you can see here, and then parenthetically the arguments, right? So parentheses and then the arguments. In this case, I only have one argument, which is a literal string Brian Green. And what this should do is it should show Brian Green, which you can see down here. It should show it in all uppercase if that works. There we go. So it's all upper. Now what I'll do is, let's do this. My name upper. Then I'll do the same thing, but we'll do it in lower. So I'll type this in all uppercase. As my name lower. And I'll show you one more. Init cap. Sorry, I had to remember what it was. So let's say I have a little string, right? Let's say it's in all uppercase like this. You know, it's common in a lot of databases that the data is entered in all uppercase for whatever reason. I don't know why. People always seem to do that. And we'll call it init cap name. There we go. All right, so I'm going to do 3 different versions. We'll do an uppercase version, a lowercase version, and then a version with init cap, with you know, where it's going to capitalize just the first letter of each word. So if we run that, hopefully it works. So we have our uppercase, all lowercase, and then you can see here it converted from all uppercase to only the first letters being uppercase, which is probably pretty common, right? That's probably something we would want. I could do the same thing when I select from table, right? So let's say I want to select star from customers, right? I think it's customers. Probably should just be customer, but there we go. All right, so you can see here that our last name and first name in the customers table is all uppercase. We probably wouldn't want that in correspondence with a customer, right? So we might do something like this. We already learned that we could do, let's see, we could do first name, comma, last name. So now I'm just going to select, let me get rid of this on the top so I don't have to keep highlighting it. So now we have the last name and the first name. And in theory, I could put them together, right? So I could do plus an empty space. We could probably also use the concat command. I don't recall if this works in Oracle. Yeah, we have to use concat. So let me use the concat. There we go. So using the concat operator. In other database engines, you just use plus to concatenate, but I always forget in Oracle we have to use our double pipes. So now I got them together, but same problem. I don't have, you know, this isn't in a format that I think a customer would like. So we'll do init cap, right? And I could just surround this whole thing with init cap. Now I could do it individually, right? I could just do init cap on first name, then init cap on last name, or I could just do init cap on the whole string that gets concatenated together. Let's see if that works. There we go. So now these names look a little bit more presentable, right? So you can kind of get a sense of how you would use this in the real world. So again, this is the these are just some capitalization. There's some other string functions we can use. So one of those functions is substring, which shows us just part of a string, which looks like this. So it's sub str. So I'll show you an example with dual first. So let's say I have a phone number, right? So let's say I've got, I'll put my phone number in here. Let me use my Google Voice number. There we go. So there's my phone number, my Google Voice number. We'll just select it from dual, right? A fake table. So that should just output my phone number. Okay, now as you know, phone numbers are made up of different parts, right? So let's say I needed to break this up into the different parts for some reason. I could use substring to do that. This substring will return just parts of a string. So if I only wanted to return the just the area code, right? Just the area code is the first 3 digits of a phone number. So I would do starting at character 1, and I want to count 3 characters. And let's see if that works. Oops. All right. It looks like I forgot something here. Let's see. It is substring. Sorry, I forgot to highlight it. If you forget to highlight it in this interface, it tries to run everything. All right, so that outputs just the area code, which is exactly what I wanted. But what if I only wanted the exchange, right? So I could do the same thing. Let's do this again. So I'm just going to copy and paste this. But this time, so here's my full phone number, but I just want to extract these 3 numbers right here. So I know I still want to count 3, but I want to start at the 3rd character, right? So now it's going to start at the 3rd character and count 3 strings. At least I think it will. All these string functions work a little different in each database engine, so I always kind of forget how they work. Let's see. So that actually I want to start at the 4th character. sorry. So because the third character is the 6, I want to start at the fourth character, which is the 2. So sometimes these string functions in other database engines are 0 indexed, meaning that the first character is actually 0. So in my head, I subtracted 1 when I shouldn't have. In Oracle, it doesn't do that. In Oracle, it starts at 1, which is a little different. Most of the other ones start at 0. But that should give us the exchange. And then if I want to just get the last 4 numbers, so to do that, let me put this in here. We're going to start, let's see, I think if we wanted to do that, we could count -4. And we know that phone numbers should always be, what is that, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, right? So start at the 11th character. So go to the 11th character, count backwards by 4, and that should give us the last 4 digits. Let's see if that works. There we go. So now, if my original string, right, so let's type the original string in here. The original string that might be in a database table would look like this. It would just be all numbers, right, with no formatting at all. But now, if I wanted to, right, if I'm constructing this for a report or something like that, I can add some formatting in here. So we're going to concatenate some stuff in here. All right, so I got, there we go. Let's do this. We'll put +1 for the country code, and then between these two, we're just going to do a space, and then that's it. I think that'll work. So let's see what this looks like now. See if our phone number's got a nice format to it. Oops. Let's see, I forgot something here. Oh, I forgot to concatenate right here. I have to concatenate both sides. Let's try this again. There we go. So here's the unformatted phone number, and I use some string functions to make a formatted version, right? That looks a little bit more like a, like a phone number you would see in some kind of output. So that's the substring function. I could do the same thing in a table, right? So let's say I wanted to select the zip code, right? So we have zip, and if I only wanted to get the first 3 characters of the zip from customers, I would do starting at character, well, count 3 characters starting at character 1, and that should give me just the first 3 characters of the zip code. Oops, I got it backwards. Sorry. It's going to be starting at character 1 and then count 3. My apologies. Again, these are all a little bit different in each database engine, so I always have to look at the documentation when I start working with these functions. But there we go. So now we just have the first 3 characters. So just like I did a literal string up here, we could just do it with a column when we select data. So let's see, another example is instring. This is one that's used for searching for characters. So let's go ahead and give that a try. So let's see if we can come up with an example here. So basically what we're going to do with instring is we're looking for some character in a data set, right? So we're trying to search for a character and return the position of that character in the string. So if I wanted to know where, for example, the @ symbol is, right? Let's do an email address. So if I do select, let's see, bgreen@atlantic.edu from Dual, that's going to give me my full email address, right? There it is. Now let's say I wanted to find out where is that @ symbol, right? So I'm going to add another, let's see, we're going to do in string. Oops, you have to spell it right. There we go. So in string, and I'll do bgreen@atlantic.edu. And I'm looking for the @ symbol, right? So let's see if it can tell me where it is. All right, so the @ symbol is in position 7. So now here's the cool thing is I can combine these different string functions, right? So we can nest these different functions. And you can do this with any row valued function, and this is actually pretty common. So you'll do this a lot. I think you do this in the homework as well. So once I know what the position is of that @ symbol, I can dynamically read only part of the, let's say I wanted to get a list of all the domains that I have for emails in my server, right? I could do something like this. I could say do substring just like we did before, right? This is the substring command, and then I'm going to do my email address, bgreen@atlantic.edu. Oops, I have to spell Atlantic right. And we want to start where the @ symbol is, right? So this is going to return an integer where the @ symbol is, right? Because the return from inString is just an integer, it's just a number. There it is right there, a 7. So this is going to dynamically substitute a 7 right there, okay? And then let's say we wanted to go all the way to the end of the string. Well, there's another, actually, what I'll do this just to show you. So one of the other string functions we have is length, right? So let's do length of bgreen@atlantic.edu. There we go. So the length is 19, right? In fact, let's copy this up here. That way we can output all this stuff. Oops. Sorry. There we go. All right. So now the third argument, I want to be the length because I want to count to the length of the string. It's a lot easier in Oracle because it's not 0-based. In other languages, this is 0-based. And then I'm going to close my parenthesis for the main function call, right? So here I have the string I'm passing in. This is the first argument. Then I'm passing in the where to start, right? With using another function, I'm getting the start position. And then using another function, I'm getting the length to tell it how far to go. And then I'm closing the function call, right? Because I have to have this parenthesis has to get closed. I know that gets a little bit long, but so let's see if that works. Not enough arguments for function. All right, so I missed something here. So let's see, what did I miss? You know what, looking at this, in string, right, it needs that @ symbol, right? I need that second argument. That's why it's telling me that. So let's put that @ symbol in there and see if that works. There we go. So now I have my full email address. That's the first one that I selected. Then I got the length, and then I'm showing the where the @ symbol is, and then there's the domain, right? It's @atlantic.edu because it passed 19 in. Now, even though the string isn't 19 characters long, it just goes to, you know, till the string stops. You know, it counts up to 19, even though it actually ends before that. So it kind of works. It gives us what we're looking for. If we really want to get fancy here, what we could do, since we know that we don't want to return the @ symbol, right? We probably don't want to return that. So I would probably add 1, right? So if I add 1 to this, that should chop off that @ symbol. So this is going to return a 7, but I really want to start at 8 because I want to not use the @ symbol. So I'll add a +1 in there. Let's just see what that does. There we go. So the domain is atlantic.edu. Let's try this on our real table, right? So let's do this from customers. I don't remember the column name. Oops. I'm not typing this right. All right, so the column is probably going to be email, but I don't remember. There we go, email. Right, so I can do email, and then we're going to do, and just to make this easy, I'm just going to copy this whole function right here. Right, we already wrote it. And by the way, this is a good technique to working with functions, is to use that dual table so you can kind of test what's going to happen. You know, sometimes when you're trying to do this against real data, it gets a little confusing. So it's good to try, you know, just on one, you know, data set that you know, just to try it. This is just a technique that I always use. All right, so now I've got email in here. Oh wait, I got to replace this one with email as well, right? So this should get me just the domain. In fact, we'll do as domain. There we go. Let's see if that works. There we go. So now I have, for each one of my customers, I can see what their email domain is. So I know, I guess, what their, you know, what their domain is. I don't know why that would be useful, but nice little exercise anyway. All right, so what else do we need to learn? So I showed you the in-string function. I showed you how to nest functions. Nesting can get pretty complicated. I also showed you length, right? So here we saw how the length works. Let's see, some other string functions. Padding, right? So we can pad our strings. Let's see if we could come up with an example of this. All right, so let's look at our customers table again. Or better yet, you know what? I'm going to do orders. Let's switch this up a little bit. I keep using customers. I feel like I should be I'm neglecting the other tables here. All right, so in orders, so let's say that the whoever runs this business says, I don't want my order numbers to be short numbers like this because I don't know, maybe it'll make it look like we're too small of a company or something. I've had people say that to me, like, hey, we can't have our order numbers be so small because people are going to think we're not that big. So I could use padding to fix that, right? So I could use padding to just put whatever I want on either the front or the back of that number if I wanted to. So for example, let's say all of our order numbers always have to be 9 characters, right? Maybe that's a business rule or something like that. So I could use LPAD to do that. So, well, first let's do order number. Right, oops, I got to spell it right though. Oracle won't be able to figure out if I don't spell it right. Although we're going to learn about a function to work with that too. All right, so LPAD. So we're going to do a left pad. So we're going to pad the left side of the string. The string is going to be order number. So I'm going to pad order number. And let's say I want to make it a minimum of 9 characters, right? So my order numbers have to be 9 characters. And I'm going to pad it with, I don't know, let's just pad it with zeros, right? That way it doesn't look like we're making it up, right? So if I do this, I should see some longer order numbers. There we go. So there's my order number that I might display for a customer, right? Now it's padded with these zeros. Of course, they're numerically equivalent, right? One thing I should mention though is that this is now a string, not a number, right? So when we took that integer, that's the order number. Once we padded those zeros on the front and output that the output from that function, so the output from LPAD, even though we're padding an integer, the output of this is going to be a varchar. So that means we can't just add numbers to it, right? So if I do order plus 2, right, that's going to output a 1002, right? But if I do this one plus 2, it should actually give me an error. Let's see what it does. No, it didn't give me an error. Instead, it just, well, I wasn't expecting that. So I guess it does work, but this should be output as a string. So I'm not sure why it actually added it again. I'm not sure about that, but Oracle's strange sometimes. What it should have done is it should have just concatenated a 2 to that or added it to the string. But in any event, let me run this again so you can see that it does add it over here. But there we got our pad back, right? So we could do an LPAD to pad the left side of the string, and you could do an RPAD to pad the other side of the string. So let's do this a different way. So we have our order number. We want to make our company look like we're huge, right? So we're going to RPAD our order number this time. Again, we want to make it 9 characters, and I'm just going to throw a bunch of zeros on the end. All right, so now my order number 1000 looks like it's a lot bigger, right? So that might, I guess it might trick somebody into thinking we've got more orders. It doesn't have to be a 0, right? I could put an asterisk on there, right? So now it just has a bunch of stars on the end. If you wanted to do that, makes it look like we obfuscated the rest of the order, or maybe a credit card number, I guess. But so we can pad both the front and the back, right, with the LPAD command. We can also trim. Okay, so trimming is where we chop things off from a string. For example, let's say, I don't know. Let's say I have a string. It's my name, Brian Green, and a whole bunch of spaces, right? So if I select this, So here's Brian Green, right? But let's say, and by the way, if I do this, right? So if I had to show the length, my name should have 11 characters. I have a pretty short name. But because I put all those spaces in there, it's 21 characters. So I know there's a whole bunch of spaces by doing that length on there. But I could trim that off. So there's two trims, like there's a left pad and a right pad. You have a left trim and a right trim. So you can trim it both ways. So let's try it. So if I do select L trim, or I'm sorry, R trim in this case. So I'm going to do R trim, Brian Green. So I've got a whole bunch of spaces on there, and I'm going to trim the spaces off, right? So I'm just going to put an empty space in there. Now, it's going to look the same when I just select it, right? But if we surround this with a length, this should return only 11, even though there was actually 21 characters in there. Let's see if that works. Oh, did I spell length wrong? I spelled length wrong. You do have to spell things right. All right, there we go. So it's back to 11. Now let's try to do this with something for real. Let's go back to our order table, right? So if we select order number from order, all right, so there's a bunch of order numbers, right? I could trim the zeros. So let's see what happens if I R trim the zeros from the order number. I don't know if this is going to work on an integer, but worth a try. And there we go. So order number 1000 becomes order number 1. Now, of course, I could do the same thing up here, right? So when we ran this before, I had a bunch of zeros on it, right? So here I got a bunch of zeros on the front. But, you know, if it were already in the database with zeros on the front and somebody said, well, that's stupid. Why do we have leading zeros on our order numbers? They're just numbers, right? So they might tell you to do a left trim and to strip off those zeros. Of course, this is the most useless function I think I've ever called, because first I'm adding a bunch of zeros, then I'm taking them away. What's the point, right? But just so you get an idea of how it works. So that's L trim and R trim. So those are trim functions. I could also replace stuff in a string. Let's see if we can find an example of something we can replace. So looking at the publisher table, we have a phone number. I like working with phone numbers. There's always some interesting things you can do with a phone number. So let's say, for example, I wanted to replace in that phone number, right? So if I just select phone, you'll see that it has the dashes, which I have there at the bottom. But let's say I wanted to change those dashes to something else. Let's say I wanted to make them spaces. So I could do a replace. In the phone, I want to replace the dash with a nothing, right? So I'm just going to take them out. I don't even need them. Oh, wait, I have to do from publisher. Sorry. All right, there we go. So I removed all the dashes. So now I have nothing in there. Of course, if I wanted to have a space in there, I could just replace it with a space. And you can replace pretty much anything. It doesn't have to be just a single character. It could be multiple characters. Let's do a select from customer and see if there's something fun we could replace. Oh, I always forget they used customers, which is not best practice, by the way. It should be customer if you follow the guidelines for making tables. All right, so for example, we have a lot of P.O. boxes in here, right? So I could replace the P.O. box with something else. Maybe we want to call it post office box instead of P.O. box. So I could do that. I could, so let's select the address. Then I'm going to do replace in address. The first argument is the string you want to search. And in this case, we're going to replace PO with post office. All right, so let's see if that works. There we go. So all of our PO boxes now say post office box. Of course, box is all uppercase. That kind of looks silly, so I'm going to take my box and make it post office box like that. Ah, darn it, I forgot to highlight it. I always forget that. There we go. So that looks a little better. All right, so that's most of the string functions. What else am I missing here? I need to show you some other ones. Yeah, how about the translate function? So translate, let's see if you need to know that one for your textbook. Well, your book has the translate function in it, oddly enough. I very rarely use it, but your book has a terrible explanation of it. I'll show you what it does. So let's say I have a string. Let's say it's, I don't know, let's use a phone number again, right? So I use my phone number, 856-283-2136. That's my phone number. As phone from Dual. Okay, now what I could do is, let's say I wanted to replace all of the dashes with a dot. Now, before we used the replace command to do that, theoretically you could also use the translate command, because it could essentially do the same thing. And this is really what I think your book actually uses an example like this. So it says, you know, something like look for the dash and replace it with a period like this. And theoretically, this should work. It should just replace those dashes with a period. But then let's say I also want to replace all of the 3s with 4s, right? So now it's going to also replace any 3 with a 4. And then maybe another string, maybe the 8s, or let's see, what else do I have? Yeah, we'll replace all the 8s with 9s. So if I did this right, this is a weird function, but when we look at the result, notice all the 8s were replaced with 9s. My 3s were replaced with 4s, right? So there was a 3, and there was a 3 there, and there was a 3 there, and my dashes got replaced. So if you just do a single character, this works just like replace. But what happens is, as you add more characters on here, so it basically matches each character position with the argument and with the or the second and the third argument. So it started with the dashes, replaces with the dots, then the 3s with the 4s, then the 8s with the 9s, and so forth and so on. So you could translate a whole list of characters into another list of characters. So it has some uses. It's not common. I don't use this very frequently, but and I don't think there's really a good analog to this in other database engines. But again, it's another option, another string function that you could use. I'm not sure if you can pass in the different number of arguments. Let's see what happens if I chop off that 9. See what it does. Yeah, I just got rid of it, right? So I gave it, the last character here is an 8, but I didn't put anything to translate it to in the second argument, so it just chopped the 8s off because there's nothing to translate it to. So again, you kind of have to be careful about calling that with the right number of parameters. All right, so that's a basic example of the translate command. I can't really think of a good example in our database to use for that, but so one more example of a string function would be the concat command. So if we do, and really an obvious example for this one is going to be our customer's name, right? Our last name, our first name from customers. Let's see if this works. I always do a lowercase m for some reason in this video. So one way I could put these names together is I could just put the pipe in here, right? The double pipe, and that'll concatenate those strings together. But there's also a function we can use to do that. So we can use the concat function. And concat, just like it sounds like, it concatenates strings together. So for example, I can do, I'll just pass in these same two strings. And the thing about the concat function is it can be overloaded. So you can pass as many things into this function as you like, and it will just concatenate every argument to the string. So here it's going to concatenate the last name to a comma with a space and then to the first name. So it'll just be a formatted name. So rather than using all those little pipes one after the other, wait a minute, maybe you can only use 2 arguments in Oracle. I always forget. Some database engines you can overload this. Yeah, I guess in Oracle you can't overload it. You have to use just 2. You can only concatenate 2 arguments, which kind of stinks. That kind of limits its usefulness, but whatever. That's how the concat function works. And again, a lot of times you'll just concatenate by using the double pipes, right? It's a little bit easier, and you can concatenate lots of things together doing it that way. All right, so that's string functions.